Things are really starting to get interesting with AI music as SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, Deezer, and other platforms are trying to figure out how to handle it. Now, this is an article on Billboard I kind of wanted to review because they bring up a lot of very interesting points. And as you can see, how are Spotify, YouTube, SoundCloud, and more preparing for AI music? How are the top services handling it? Now, if I go down here, I want to start off here about the dead internet theory, the idea that AI-generated material will eventually flood the internet so thoroughly that nothing human can be found. And this is starting to happen with AI music. Here's the main concept. If I had to ask you, how long does it take a human to make a song? Tough to say, right? We've probably seen YouTube videos where someone tries to make a song in 10 minutes, maybe it takes you an hour, but if you think about it, in the time that, let's say, it takes you to make one song, AI, or someone using Suno or Udio could make a song to make songs, maybe even 10 songs, in the time that it takes you to make one song. Let me take that back. You could probably make 50 songs with an AI music generator in the time that it takes a human to make one song. Maybe even 100, right? So the idea is that it's so easy to make content, whether it's text, pictures, video, in this case, audio, that there's going to be a point that, as you can see here, that the internet, at some point with the dead internet theory, will be so thoroughly flooded that nothing human can be found. And that could be an issue regarding AI music, right? And it says right here that as years come up by 2028, it could put about 24% or a quarter of music creators' revenues at risk. How should they take action? This is a big thing. Exactly how they should take action remains unclear. And I think that's the big thing about this, right? It is such a tricky thing. And I mentioned this before in a previous video that French streaming service Deezer took its first step towards a solution by launching an AI detection tool that will flag whether it deems a fully AI-generated tag and such and remove it from the algorithmic recommendations. The company claims the tool found about 10% of tracks uploaded to its service every day are fully AI generated. I'm not going to lie. I think that's actually not the case. I think it's higher than that. But the tricky thing is, how can you truly tell if something's AI? Now, I think right now we're still in that kind of game of cat and mouse where there are some ways if I listen to a song, I'm like, yeah, I can tell it's AI. But as things get smarter and smarter, it is really difficult to say, did AI make this or not? Like I've said this before, I've heard some human-made songs that sounded actually more like AI. And I've heard some AI songs that sounded more human, right? It's one of those really tricky things that how do you know? And you go down here, and this is the big thing. I actually did like this, and this person who wrote this agreed. The Deezer's announcement sounded like a great solution. AI music can remain. So let's say if you do want to listen to AI music, it can remain on Deezer. And for me, I mentioned this before, that there are some songs that I've made, put that in quotation marks, that I've listened to under the Infinite Lamb Chop, which is my AI artist. And I sometimes prefer that over a human artist, right? So you can listen to AI music on Deezer, but it won't be pushed in users' faces, giving human-made content a little head start, which I really like. In addition, you can still earn royalties on Deezer from AI music. I mentioned before that right now, DistroKid does allow and green lights AI music. It will put it on all the services like Apple Music and more. So things are, I think, a good, at least from my perspective, when it comes to Deezer, a good middle ground, right? In addition, as this, who wrote this article? I want to give them credits to by Christian Robinson. As Kristen said, and I kind of agree, I wonder why other companies haven't followed suit. I feel like what Deezer's doing is a good thing. You can have AI music be on the platform. You can make money from it. But we're not going to recommend it in algorithmic recommendations. We're going to save that for humans. I think that's the perfect middle ground. After speaking to multiple AI experts, it seems many of today's AI detection tools generally still leave something to be desired. There's a lot of false positives. That is a huge issue. I've said this before. I did a video about Spotify, how Spotify tries to crack down on people buying streams, buying and paying for bots that artificially boost their streams, their analytics, their numbers to get more views, streams, etc. on their songs. And the big issue with this is, on one end, if you're buying streams, which you shouldn't, Spotify will take down your records and your tracks. That being said, there's been a lot of false positives with that. A bit different than AI music, but kind of similar in the sense that kind of like the road to hell is paved with good intentions, that Spotify's intention is to remove people trying to game the algorithm. But there's been a lot of cases of people uploading their music, celebrity features it. a big playlist randomly picks it up. They get a ton of views out of nowhere, and then Spotify thinks they're fake, right? There's a lot of false positives, as this here. The fear for some streamers is that a bad AI detection tool could open up the possibility of human-made songs, like I mentioned before, getting accidentally caught up in the whirlwind of AI issues and become a huge headache for the staff who would have to review the inevitable complaints from users. Like I just said, I've listened to some songs that, I'm going to be honest, sounded AI, but really were actually made by human artists. I mean, if you look at things like auto-tune and these other features, there is a creative aspect sometimes to making a song the way that you want. And if, like, say, you are a fan of some computer vocal sounding thing, it could sound very AI-ish to people, like, say, who don't know that you actually did that on purpose, right? And then it's like, do you have to humanize it more, right? This could get very tricky. And really, when you get down to it, how can the naked ear definitively tell the difference between the human-generated and AI music? And I'm going to be honest now, in this day and age, with as much as I know about music, I've been into music all my life. I've been producing for, this point, 13 years now. I think Suno and Udio are good enough where if you sent me a song and said, is it human or AI, I would not be able to tell. It's like the Turing test in real life. Is this human or AI? I honestly don't know. I think we're at that point. Now, granted, yeah, there's still some ways where if I listen to a song, I'm like, yeah, I can tell with the vocals. I think the vocals are, in my opinion, the biggest giveaway. But I don't know. I made some cinematic and orchestral tracks on, I think Udio, makes really good cinematic songs. I guess Suno too, where I was blown away. And I was like, I honestly would not be able to tell this is AI. And even removing the vocals part, instrumentals. I think now we're at the point that if you remove the vocals, there's no way to tell, in my opinion. And I know some people say, no, I can tell this is not a real guitar. I know some people say, oh, I can tell this is not a real saxophone. And I'm a saxophone player. But I ask you, can you genuinely tell the difference, human or AI? Or are you saying it because of an ego thing? Hate to say it, because I think we're at that point now, right? And this is not to say that the Deezer's proprietary AI music detector isn't great. It's a step in the right direction, which I agree with. But the newness and skepticism that surrounds this AI detection technology is clearly a reason why other streaming services have been reluctant to try themselves. It is tricky. You could have some false positives. How do you know how accurate it is? How do you deal with it? It's insanely tricky, right? And this is another thing too. Protecting against the negative uses cases of AI music like spamming, streaming fraud, and deepfaking are a focus for many streaming services today, even though almost all of the policies in place to date are not specific to AI. There's not really been, besides Deezer, a streaming platform to come out and say yes or no. And I've talked about this in a lot of other videos that it is a double-edged sword. If you say yes, you're saying, come on down and load up the floodgates. If you say no, though, how do you police it? How do you know if it's AI or not? How do you know people might make it up? They may be like, no, don't worry, I made it. Wink, wink. And they're just uploading it. And I've said this before. For me, I upload music under the Infinite Lamb Chop. I'm very vocal. It's an AI artist. I'm not trying to pretend it's not. Everything's AI generated. I've done nothing, right? I just type in the prompt. That's it. On the other end, I have friends, and I mentioned this before, that are actual artists that perform out live and all this kind of stuff that use Suno and Udio to make songs and pretend like they made it in Ableton. And they're like, hey, check out my new track. I worked on this one for a while. And sometimes I'm like, oh, man, come on. But they'll be like, oh, I worked on this track for a while. I want to embody this theme, and I made this melody. And it's like, they read this whole write-up. I'm like, oh, my God. I'm like, dude, I know you made this in Udio. And I was like, I get it. It's almost like high. It's also, too, you could argue this. What's the difference between using Suno and Udio to make AI music and having a ghost producer? Well, it definitely is two different things. Of course, using AI or a human, if you think about it, in a sense, Suno and Udio is almost like a low-key or, I guess, high-key ghost producer, right? And that's what's very tricky. As you go down here, as a song is good, will it really matter where it came from? That's another big thing. I know a lot of people on this channel have commented saying, hey, Mark, I'm not a musician, but I watch your videos about AI music because I think it's interesting. And for me, I don't care. If it's AI or human, I generally don't care. It's possible that we might look back on this with a laugh. Maybe future generations won't discriminate fully between AI, partially AI, or fully human works. A good song is a good song. And I do agree with that. For me, like I mentioned before, I have a video on this channel. I have all my AI music videos listed below in a playlist. And I posted my favorite AI songs that I've made. It's like an hour and 45 minutes, almost 2 hours long, of all my favorite AI songs. And I'm not gonna lie, there are some of them that I'm like, hey, this is a banger. I listen to my own, still with that in quotation marks, which we'll talk about in a second, my own AI music from the Infinite Lamb Shop, sometimes when I'm working out. And I prefer it like I said. And so at the end of the day, I think for a lot of listeners, which might piss off a lot of artists, and I can see both sides, for all listeners, they're like, hey, if it's a banger, it's a banger. But things get tricky. The U.S. Copyright Office just issued a new directive affirming that fully AI-generated works are ineligible for copyright protection. For streaming services, this technically means, like all other public domain works, that the service does not need to pay royalties on it. But so far, most platforms have continued to just pay out on anything that's up on the site, copyright protected, or not. And that's another weird one, that when you look at that, this whole situation, the legal stuff is a whole other can of worms. I want to stress, I'm not a lawyer and I never pretend to be one. The legal rules around AI are insanely, it's a very gray area, because it really comes down to, I think a big thing is who made it or not, right? Like if I make a song and I use an AI tool for vocals, I think people say, yeah, you can copyright it, it's yours. But then it becomes almost like the ship of Theseus, where if I go to YouTube and I type in, make me an EDM song, did I really create it? No. I mean, I typed in a sentence. I typed in 4 or 5 words, right? But then there's a point where it's like, how much do you have to use AI, or how much of AI can you use, and how much of yourself do you have to create with it that actually says, yeah, you know what, I actually made this. Like there are some people who argue, well, hey, I wrote the lyrics myself, I created this guitar melody, and then I gave it to AI and it made a song. Did I make it? And it's like, well, I don't know. Like you could argue that technically you made this guitar melody yourself, you wrote the lyrics yourself, you didn't sing it though. Did you make it or not? And there are other people, like the bare minimum, who argue, if I go to Sudo and I say, make me a song about parkour that's a deep house song, there are some people who argue that you made it because you still created that prompt, you thought of it yourself. I don't think so, but it is a more, if anything, I think a philosophical debate, like the ship of Theseus. And going about and talking about different platforms, SoundCloud is one that's kind of been talking about AI music though. SoundCloud, a platform that's always marched to the beat of its own drum, it has a policy which prohibits the monetization of songs and content that are exclusively generated through AI, encouraging creators to use AI as a tool rather than a replacement of human creation. This is the first platform, it's going to sound kind of funny, I personally don't consider SoundCloud a streaming service. I know by definition it is, you go on and you stream a song. I personally don't consider it a streaming service. I feel like it's in its own category. SoundCloud, I just did a video about, is SoundCloud worth it in 2025? Short answer, yes, but I don't think as much compared to like DistroKid, for example, or releasing music on all these platforms. But there's always a place for SoundCloud. It is really its own thing. And it's interesting that it's come out and said that. Most streaming services do not have specific policies. Like I said, Spotify, YouTube Music, and others have implemented procedures, though, for users to report impersonations of likeness and voices, a major risk posed by AI. This is one that I will say that when stores have come out and mentioned something, I just the word something, regarding AI, it's usually in terms of impersonation or taking copyrighted material and putting it in songs, trying to pretend like it's somebody else. YouTube implemented a tool, I think it was last year. Well, now when I upload a video, there's a yes or no box that I have to check saying, are you trying to pretend like this is somebody else? Are you deep faking anybody? Are you impersonating anybody using AI to make it seem like it's them? And I always say no, because obviously I'm not, but that's the thing. This closely and kind of does resemble the method for requesting a takedown on the grounds of copyright infringement, but it has limits. Copyright infringement gets very, very tricky when you're talking about impersonating people. There have been, we've probably seen this, a lot of AI songs and videos out there of being like, listen to this one song sung by this one person. Like on this channel, the first videos I posted about AI music, it's kind of funny, it was like a trend of Eric Cartman singing a bunch of songs, like Eric Cartman singing all these different songs. I feel like that was the first time for me that I first kind of heard AI music being like, oh, this is kind of interesting. Like, was it, I think it was Bring Me Back to Life, the song that Eric Cartman sung. And I was like, whoa, it's actually pretty good. That was the first time for me that I actually heard anything generated by AI that actually like kind of hit me. I was like, oh, I actually kind of I F with this, if you get what I'm saying, Very interesting, right? And YouTube Music has focused more than perhaps on other streaming services on curbing deepfake impersonations. Like I said with the Eric Cartman thing. YouTube has developed, like I said before, a new synthetic singing identification technology within Content ID that will allow partners to automatically detect and manage AI-generated content on YouTube that simulates their singing voices. So what's funny is on those Eric Cartman videos that I posted on this channel, I'm sharing revenue. What that means is if I post a video like this video, I make all the money. It's my video. But if I post a song by Lady Gaga, she makes all the money from that video because it's all her stuff. But sometimes there's a middle ground, and YouTube calls this sharing revenue. So on those Eric Cartman videos, for example, on this channel, I'm making half the revenue because I kind of made the video. It's technically all this kind of stuff, but at the same time, some of that revenue is being sent to Evanescence, who made the song Bring Me Back to Life, because technically it's really just an AI transforming it in a way, and it's like, is it really all my own work? No. Is it really all of Evanescence work? In some ways, I'd actually more argue, yeah, but YouTube says, you know what? You get some money, they get some money, everyone goes home happy. And whether it's Eric Cartman crushing some vocals of Evanescence, whether it's Spotify looking at AI music stuff, whether it's Deezer using these unique AI tools, the whole realm of AI music is just super tricky. This is a very well-written article talking about so many different aspects of the technology, to the philosophical implications, to future projections, to even legal stuff, and a lot more. And I think the big thing that I think about, and I'm going to do a dedicated video about this soon, is the dead internet theory. With everything going on here, the dead internet theory to me is the one that brings up a lot of philosophical conflictions, right? Because right now there's about, give or take, it's tough to say exactly, but give or take about 50,000 new songs uploaded to Spotify every day. Now, let's say Deezer's correct. I think it's actually probably higher, but let's say Deezer's correct, that 10% of their songs are AI. That means right now, about 45,000 songs uploaded every day to Spotify are human, 5,000 every day are uploaded are actually AI. Now, I could see it happening more and more. We're going to reach a point that it's about 50-50. Half the songs uploaded are human, half the songs uploaded are AI. And then there's going to be a point that because it's so easy, like I mentioned in so many videos, and I've demonstrated how to do it in so many videos, because it's so easy to upload AI-generated music and create songs, it could be that 99% of songs being uploaded to Spotify are AI. Because like I said, if let's say it takes you an hour to make a song, which is still pretty fast, I'm not gonna lie. Let's say you make a song in an hour. If I had to ask you, compared to like someone using Studio, like you're gonna speed run it, so to speak, and you're like, I'm gonna see how many songs I can make in an hour on Studio, I wouldn't be surprised. There is some limitations with Suno and all that kind of stuff, but I wouldn't be surprised if you could bang out. I mean, you're talking about, like, say, in an hour, how many songs per minute? You could probably bang out maybe, I don't know, what I'm thinking, like 5 songs a minute, 3 songs a minute. I'd say 3 songs a minute. That's 180 songs. Let's just round it down to 150. I could probably make 150 songs on Suno compared to a human making a song in an hour. 150 versus 1. And still, that's only an hour. That's only an hour for a human to make a song, which still, unless you're doing some crazy speedrun music thing, a lot of musicians take a lot longer. A lot of musicians do an album a year of just 10 songs. You're talking about a year, that's almost a song a month. How many songs do you think you can make in a month with Suno Udio? A lot. And I think that's the issue, is that there's going to be such a huge flood, and there's continuing to be a huge flood of AI music, with some people getting into it because they like it. But I'm going to be honest, a lot of people getting into Suno Udio, like I mentioned before in a lot of other videos, just to make money. They're looking at it as a get-rich-quick scheme. And that's another thing. They're like, hey, I don't care about music. Music's music. If I can make money doing this thing, and it takes me 2 seconds to make these songs, and I can upload them and start making passive income, which for me, I just checked $75 from the Infinite Lamb shop. Nothing crazy, but it's all passive. Passive. It is, I guess, technically, you know? And a lot of people argue, well, if I just keep doing this, if I upload a song a day or a couple of songs a day, and I just hustle all day, every day, uploading all this music, not bad, right? But I think that's where things get tricky, is because there's going to be a point, potentially inevitably, if there's no barriers put on this, that if you listen to a song, there's like a 1 in maybe 10,000 chance that it's human, and like 90.99% of the time, it's going to be AI. And I think that's why some platforms have sort of give pushback, like Deezer, like Soundcloud, and more. There are platforms cracking down on impersonation, like I said with YouTube. At the end of the day, I think that this is the first time, I think especially now in 2025, I think last year, it was very uncertain. What do we do with AI music or not? I'm not sure. It's kind of vague. Is it really going to take off? Are people even going to care? Now that we're at the point where I think, from my perspective, looking at all this, that a lot of streaming services say, okay, we can't just be quiet now. We can't do nothing, because choosing to do nothing is still a choice in of itself. Now we're going to have to make moves. Now we're going to have to make statements. Now we're going to have to put in new policies. What are those policies going to be with AI music? I have no idea, but all I'm going to say is things with AI music are now starting to get mainstream attention. How's it going to work? Where's it going to work? What's going to happen with all of this? I don't know, but all I'm going to say is things are now really starting to heat up regarding AI music.